Trump hit Putin where it hurts.
Putin is already heading into the fourth year of a war he was supposed to win in a week.
Donald Trump's son is sure that his father is already awaited in heaven.
I can say this as a son because I saw the hand on him. God's hand for a very long time, which led him through the most unimaginable, dark path.
Lukashenko has started to believe in himself, but is the US ready for this?
We are ready to make a big deal with them. On one side of the scale are their questions, requests, and demands. On the other side of the scale are our questions and demands.
More weapons will be supplied to Ukraine.
Finland is increasing its support for Ukraine. The country is joining the PURL initiative. It will purchase American weapons for the armed forces of Ukraine.
A coup in France. Macron is on the edge.
Macron is incapable of running the country. And the EU, instead of helping, it only makes the crisis worse.
But what is eternal in Russia is Solovyov and his nonsense.
Last time there was a really good Napoleon, not Izmash, right? Oreshnik was tested on Izmash. You made the right decision. Here you can use the British way on the right if you are gray-haired.
Well, it's okay. Russia isn't the only one with problems with his head. Soloviev.
Just you wait, the wolf is smoking. But in reality, he doesn't smoke. Take the gene, a thief. This is all subconscious programming of our population. Apparently, the collective West can't sleep.
The heart of oil-rich Russia is in a panic. There's no gasoline even in Tyumen.
Oleg Pasternak is joining our broadcast now. We welcome him, and you, dear viewers, welcome. Hello, Oleg. I want to ask you a question. US President Donald Trump seems to be optimistic about ending the war in Ukraine after the successful case between Hamas and Israel. Well, at least that's how it looks publicly right now. He presents it as his own victory in achieving a temporary ceasefire. Could you please tell us if that's really the case? Because that's what international media are writing about right now. And of course, considering his meeting with Zelensky the day after tomorrow, what is the current situation between the American and Ukrainian presidents? Are they pursuing the same goal? How likely does Trump see the possibility of ending the war? Is it realistic? What is your assessment?
Well, Trump, he made a significant contribution to resolving the consequences of Israel's anti-terrorist war against Hamas, and he deserves to be recognized for that. And his team, represented by his son-in-law Bernard Kouchner and Special Envoy Witkoff, with the active and significant involvement of Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt, these nations basically accomplished what neither the current Biden administration nor in their efforts was able to achieve. The extensive, prolonged negotiations of Egyptian and Qatari mediators between Hamas and Israel had been able to achieve before. So if you ask me whether Trump really deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, which he surely dreams of, and that's no secret, then in principle for the general public he absolutely does. His role is enormous. And why did this happen? Israel had long resisted the Americans' peace initiatives. Moreover, Israel took a risk and went into international isolation. Europe, by recognizing Palestine as a separate state, it significantly went all in against Israel and, in doing so, sacrificed crucial European-Israeli relations. And yet, at the final and most critical stage, Netanyahu found himself under significant American pressure, primarily because his actions, in particular the aggressive strikes on Qatar and the deliberate prolonging of the war, along with the accumulation of certain domestic political challenges and issues, were causing considerable international concern and diplomatic strain. Contradictions due to this war, the failure to free the hostages, all of this led to decisive actions. I really like the meme that's popular on social media right now about how Americans under different presidents tried to resolve the relations between Israel and various groups of opposing sides in the Middle East. And they always called for peace, for dialogue, but only Trump clearly showed strength. Here, Zelensky is absolutely right when he says that if Trump wants to, he can demonstrate a certain strength, including towards Russia. But here, first and foremost, Trump showed strength not only towards Hamas. Hamas was pressured by Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt. He primarily put pressure on Israel and, let's say, guided the current Israeli government towards peace. even though there are ministers like Ben Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich who represent orthodox political groups, and they were completely opposed to halting the war. This situation could have caused a truly significant internal crisis within Israel, so President Trump clearly showed not only his mediating efforts, he also demonstrated the strength of the relationships, for example, between the parties who actually signed in Sharm el-Sheikh. More precisely, the parties who in principle signed the deal with the mediation of the Arab countries and the United States of America. How does all of this extrapolate to Russian-Ukrainian relations and the war? First of all, you shouldn't draw an equal sign between Israel and Hamas and between Russia and Ukraine at all. The equal sign for the very simple and straightforward reason that these various conflicts have distinctly different historical, deeply existential and complex political backgrounds. Indeed, they possess diverse origins, underlying causes, and fundamental beginnings. And in the specific and highly significant case of the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war, it is worth noting that Donald Trump, the former president, frequently and often spoke about this particular situation. He doesn't understand why Putin, just yesterday it seems, at a briefing, doesn't understand why, given the devastation of the Russian economy. And he mentioned the figure of 1.5 million soldiers as casualties of this war. And although it's absolutely necessary to double check and clarify everything that comes from Trump 1,000 times, nevertheless, he's right. And he can't understand, given such circumstances. Putin continues this bloody war, once again appealing to some kind of logic, to some sort of rational instinct, to an analysis of consequences and further calculations. But it's all very simple. The nature of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict lies in psychological obsession. For Vladimir Putin, Ukraine is the absolutely essential and indeed missing element he profoundly needs to form a powerful imperial cult, to fully restore the historical imperial space and its significant influence in the entire region. After the Soviet era, after the Soviet states, he lost a great deal of influence in Central Asia. He lost the North Caucasus. In the end, he even lost the favor of the Arab states, and Russia cancelled the so-called Russia-Arab East Summit. Precisely because hardly anyone wanted to come, and in fact very few were willing to attend. That's precisely why, at this very moment, Donald Trump is indeed greatly tempted to fully take advantage of the numerous opportunities for genuine peace that are emerging from the global stage, wielding the significant power in the name of fostering peace, all in a concerted effort to effectively push Russia toward engaging in a new, constructive dialogue. At the same time, this carries certain risks and presents some opportunities for ending the war because out of the blue, Ukrainian politicians Yulia Tymoshenko, Alexei Honcharenko, and some experts are already actively talking about the imminent end of the war. Although I can hardly imagine what they're such statements. For the most part, it seems more like some mystification and feelings. Although, of course, there are rumors that if Trump wants to, he can put phenomenal pressure on Russia, and he will get the result he wants, concessions from Russia. But don't forget that Trump's mediation also means concessions from Ukraine. If by some extraordinary and truly unforeseen miracle, after the highly anticipated and much discussed date of Friday the 17th, and following yet another crucial and potentially pivotal meeting between the prominent figures of Trump and Zelensky, this delicate and complex peaceful settlement is somehow successfully steered back into its intended and rightful course, then we might see a different outcome. The narratives of constantly building bridges between Washington and Moscow, the need for compromise from both Ukraine and Russia, and so on. In other words, communication could change significantly after Friday. It's not necessarily, as many media like to say, that on the 17th, Trump and Zelensky will discuss only that. There could be other topics or systems discussed quite willingly. I believe the agenda will be broader, including the prospects for a peaceful settlement, possibly as a result of some recent contacts between the American and Russian sides, especially since Peskov has confirmed that contacts are ongoing. And for now, Russia continues to show stoic patience, despite the jabs, the rhetorical comments and remarks from Trump, which are rather humiliating for Putin and for the Kremlin. Nevertheless, Russia truly endures. It endures precisely because it is very much eager to break the current deadlock and does not want to sacrifice its crucial US-Russian relations. Because in this way, well, at least they have certain valuable opportunities to effectively get their important message across to Washington. Some crucial channels of communication still remain, which make it entirely possible to maintain at least some essential balance of security in the world.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
I actually want to ask you about how much Trump, well, as you said, he doesn't want to sacrifice Russian-American relations, but nevertheless, Peskov directly says that Putin is guided by the interests of the Russian Federation, the Russian people, and so on. Trump dismisses all statements by saying, well, it's fine, Putin doesn't do anything without reason. And here is his actual quote. Putin has repeatedly said that he is open to moving the whole process into a political diplomatic channel. But right now, there is a problem with that. So what exactly is the problem?
Well, it's not easy for me to judge exactly what Putin means, because first and foremost, I only see certain things from him. The configuration of continuing the war, strengthening his own personal circle of influence, represented by his family, relatives, and his closest loyal oligarchs, the displacement of people with alternative viewpoints, both within the Kremlin elite and among those whose sentiments are aimed at escalating or transforming the conflict into a larger one, toward greater confrontation with NATO countries, possibly even in a military format. In fact, the drones and aircraft heading toward NATO are serving this purpose, creating an atmosphere of fear and scaring NATO countries with the prospect of an expanded military conflict. This is generally very, very similar because bringing the armed forces of the Republic of Belarus to combat readiness comes from the same logic. And by the way, today Zelensky mentioned that this could be a direct threat to Ukraine. Therefore, this serves as a counter-argument that Putin uses, hinting and making such symbolic gestures to the West, suggesting that in the event of providing Ukraine with... Meanwhile, Russia, for its part, is increasing Ukraine's vulnerability, including through its northern borders and through the Republic of Belarus, something we haven't heard about for quite some time. That's why this is quite a delicate escalation point from the side of all key players. You correctly focused on the remarks of some of Lukashenko, who has become more active with his usual threats that if Ukraine does not make peace, if it does not compromise, it would seem to threaten its dismantling as an independent sovereign state. But this nonsense is usually meant to accompany another bout of nervousness to create a psychological situation. Certain kinds of radical sentiments, yes, as if the Russian-Belarusian side is trying to create the appearance of a real threat to the West, and to use this as an argument in negotiations about not allowing Ukraine to be given Tomahawks. In fact, the very provision of Tomahawks. You see, it won't solve many military problems, including at the front, but symbolically it will be a strong blow to Putin's underbelly. And naturally, this gesture will be interpreted in the media, in the press, and by the global public as a shift in Trump's position toward backing Ukraine in its struggle, in its defensive war against the Russian Federation.
Oleg, there's something else I'd like to ask you. This is the Minister of Defense. Right now, the United States Secretary of Defense has called on NATO countries to increase their purchases of American weapons for Ukraine. The reason for this was the recent decrease in supplies to Ukraine from July to August. According to a report by the Institute of World Economy, the volume of support dropped by 43%. This is indeed a significant figure compared to the first half of the year. And now they have developed a certain program to increase these supplies. Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Germany, Latvia, the Netherlands, Norway and Sweden have already joined the initiative. Peace is achieved, says Pete Hegseth, not through loud words or threats, but through real capabilities that the enemy respects. Listen, The statement is super impressive, but honestly, do you think there are actual tools to implement such statements? And how long are the US really interested in supporting Ukraine? As I understand it, when increasing volumes, what is the most important thing?
I think that now perhaps it's not just about purchases within the framework of the Pulu Initiative, when allied countries buy weapons for Ukraine and organize direct deliveries to the front and for the defense of Ukraine's airspace. In American media, the issue of restoring military aid to Ukraine free of charge is being raised, and even the latest sociological surveys of Americans reflect this. Especially among Trump voters and Republican Party voters, they would welcome such an initiative. I don't know how seriously the American administration might be considering restoring the previous standards of behavior toward Ukraine. We're talking about the Biden aid packages, and when military supplies are provided free of charge, that's actually very important because Ukraine's budget simply can't handle serious heavy weaponry. Purchasing extremely expensive items, starting with Patriot interceptor missiles and ending with things like Tomahawks. The cost of a single Tomahawk missile, if I recall correctly, reached up to $1 million. But these are colossal resources. I want to tell you that even some NATO countries, including those you mentioned earlier, would also struggle to afford such purchases without some kind of collective pooling and solidarity-based cooperation. Because Ukraine clearly needs not just 30, not even 50 of them, but in the long run, although even that would be quite enough to create a very serious strategic vulnerability for the Russian Federation. Not only the front lines, but also the capitals of the Russian Federation, St. Petersburg and Moscow, would be within range. Therefore, overall, the NATO program is working. But it will require more prompt. And providing support and possibly even direct military aid packages to Ukraine would also be very reasonable to consider right now. I think the Ukrainian delegation will be probing this issue somewhere along the way. I'm not sure that Trump will be inclined to suddenly change his rhetoric right now, but in this regard, Trump is really not very predictable. And he often changes his point of view. Where he previously said that there was not a single center in Ukraine, to Ukraine, yes, a long time ago, a year ago now, believe me, by portraying Russia as an uncontrollable, irrational party, for the average American who previously wasn't particularly engaged with this topic, the prospect of providing massive military aid to Ukraine is becoming a very appealing gesture. And this is part of the Peace Through Strength program that Hexit and Trump are talking about.
We are really looking forward to seeing this realized in material terms. Thank you so much. Ole Pasternak, political technologist, was on air with Ukraine Today. All the best.
Yes, take care.